My husband always ignored my family, refused to attend events, and never seemed to care about their opinions. Then he came to my sister's wedding and dropped a bombshell that changed everything. The family went from cold to apologetic, but it was too late for me to forgive him. I never understood why my husband, Daniel, never made an effort to connect with my family. I grew up in a very tight-knit family. Every Sunday, we'd gather at my parents' house for dinner, playing cards, telling stories, and sharing laughs. They were my lifeline, and I always believed they'd be a big part of my life. But Daniel? He was always the outsider. He would come, but his heart never seemed to be in it. He would sit in the corner, occasionally making awkward small talk, but he never seemed to want to be there. I thought it was just a phase, that maybe he wasn't comfortable around people he didn't know well. But that excuse wore thin as the years went by. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family event, I noticed he didn't care. He'd always make excuses like he was too tired or had work, when the truth was he just didn't want to go. It hurt. It really did. But I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe things would change. Fast forward to my sister Lily's wedding. We'd been planning it for months, and I was beyond excited to be by her side. But Daniel's behavior was still the same, distant and uninterested. I could see the frustration in my parents' eyes. My dad had tried to make conversation, but Daniel just seemed to brush him off every time. The wedding day arrived, and Daniel surprised me by saying he wouldn't attend. He claimed there was some urgent business meeting that had come up last minute. I was furious. It wasn't just that he didn't want to attend. It was the disrespect. Lily had always tried to include him, even though he barely gave her the time of day. But no, he was choosing to sit this one out. I was hurt, and I let him know it. He didn't seem fazed at all. "It's your sister's wedding, not mine," he said coldly. "You'll be fine without me." I went without him, feeling a sense of loneliness settle in. I spent the day with my family, all the while missing Daniel, but also resenting him for not even trying to show up. I had hoped the event would somehow change his perspective, but it seemed like it was only making things worse. The reception was everything I expected it to be: lively, fun, and full of love. But then, something unexpected happened. A familiar voice called out to me from across the room. I turned, expecting to see my sister or one of her friends, but instead, it was Daniel. He was there. It wasn't just that he had shown up, it was the way he walked in. Confident, dressed impeccably, and for once, he actually seemed to care. He was chatting with everyone, laughing with my cousins, and even making an effort to talk to my parents. My mom looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief, and whispered, "Who is this, and where's my son-in-law?" I felt a rush of anger and confusion. Why had he done this? Why was he suddenly so different? I confronted him later that night. "What the hell, Daniel? You refused to come, and now you're acting like Mr. Popular." He smiled, but there was no apology in his eyes. I had business to attend to, but then I realized I was wrong about everything. I've been so caught up in my own world that I missed out on everything you've been telling me about. Your family isn't just a bunch of strangers, they're the people you love, the people who've always been there for you. I needed to see that for myself. I was stunned. Was this really the man I married? Was he actually admitting that he had been wrong? But then came the real shocker. Lily walked up to us, smiling brightly, and introduced her new husband to Daniel. The two of them exchanged pleasantries, and then, with a glint in his eye, Daniel leaned over to me and said, "I see who she married now. He's a lot more successful than I ever gave him credit for. He's impressive." Lily's husband was a well-known entrepreneur, and though he wasn't flashy about it, he was wealthy. And Daniel, always so prideful, had never seen it before. But now he couldn't hide the awe in his eyes. He was trying to be humble, but I saw the gears turning in his head. That's when the real shift happened. As the night went on, Daniel made it a point to speak to everyone. My dad, my cousins, even my estranged uncle, who had always avoided him. He wanted to impress. He wanted to be liked. And for once, he wasn't just going through the motions. He was actually engaged. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about him finally getting it. There was something about the way he was looking at Lily's husband, something that made me feel uneasy. Was he trying to prove something to himself? To me? Or was he just trying to fit into the life he thought he had missed out on? The night ended and we left the venue together, but I couldn't get the image of Daniel standing there, trying so hard to fit in out of my mind. He'd never cared before, but suddenly he wanted to be a part of everything. I had no idea what had triggered this change in him, but I couldn't ignore the doubt that was creeping in. What if this was all just a facade? What if he was only pretending to care, only showing up because he was trying to keep up with someone else? I didn't have answers, but I was more uncertain than ever about the man I had married. The days following the wedding were strangely quiet. Daniel was different. There was no denying that. He was more attentive, making an effort to talk to my parents and even texting me during the day just to check in. It felt odd, like I was getting a glimpse of the man I had always hoped he would be. But there was something unsettling about it too. Was it genuine, or was he just putting on a show? He insisted on coming to every family gathering after that, and it was clear he was trying harder than ever to fit in. I noticed my family members, particularly my dad, warming up to him. They started seeing him in a new light, complimenting him on his business decisions and talking about how much he had grown. But all I could think about was that look in his eyes when he talked about Lily's husband. It wasn't just admiration, it was envy. He was trying to measure up to someone he had always felt inferior to, and it made me wonder if this newfound interest in my family was just a result of competition, not real connection. One night we were sitting on the couch after dinner, and Daniel turned to me, his face serious. You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything lately, about my career, about our future. I had no idea where this was going, but I braced myself. I've realized I've been so focused on my own success that I neglected what really matters. I've neglected you, your family. I want to change that, he said, his voice low but sincere. I wanted to believe him. I really did. For years, I had longed for him to see my family the way I did, but something about his tone made me cautious. Daniel, what's really going on? I asked. Why now? What changed? He sighed, rubbing his face. I think I've been a little lost. Watching your sister's wedding made me realize that I've been trying to prove something to myself. I've been comparing myself to everyone, especially your sister's husband. He has everything I've ever wanted: success, respect, status, and I've been so consumed by that comparison that I forgot about us. I stared at him, stunned. He was admitting it all, but there was something about his confession that felt hollow. Was he really changing, or was he just overwhelmed by his own insecurities? We don't need to compete, Daniel, I said quietly. We need to be a team. I don't care about the things you think you're missing out on. I care about you, and I care about our future together. He looked at me with those intense eyes, and for a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, he finally understood. But then his phone buzzed, and he picked it up without hesitation. It's work, he said, his voice shifting. The warmth in the room disappeared as he read a message. I could see the shift in him, his focus returning to his career, his business. The man I had fought for all these years, the man who had promised to change, was slipping away again. I sighed, realizing that I had been hoping for too much. Maybe I was naive to think one event could change everything. Daniel had always been a man of excuses, and I was starting to wonder if that was ever going to change. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of small moments, some hopeful, some disappointing. Daniel's attempts at being a better husband were consistent, but they never felt genuine. It was as if he was following a script, ticking off the boxes of what he thought I wanted. I could tell that his mind was still on work, on status, on proving himself to the world. I began to pull away, emotionally. I didn't want to give up on him, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that he wasn't fully present with me. He was there physically, but his mind was elsewhere, on business calls, on emails, on whatever had his attention. I couldn't compete with that, and it hurt. One evening, after a long day, I came home to find Daniel in the living room, sitting with his laptop open. The house was quiet, and there was a strange tension in the air. I had hoped for a peaceful night, maybe some quality time with him, but that wasn't going to happen. As I walked in, I noticed he was staring at the screen, his brow furrowed in concentration. Daniel? I asked, my voice gentle, but he didn't even look up. I moved closer, glancing at the screen, and froze. There on the laptop was a conversation between Daniel and none other than Lily's husband, Richard. At first, I couldn't make sense of it, but then I saw it. Daniel was asking Richard for advice on business ventures. He was asking for his opinion on ways to expand his influence, and there was talk about investments and networking opportunities that felt way too personal. It wasn't just about business anymore. It felt like he was trying to compete with Richard in every way possible. My heart sank. The jealousy that had been brewing in Daniel for years was now spilling over, and I realized that it wasn't just a temporary feeling, it was consuming him. Daniel, what is this? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. You've been talking to Richard behind my back? He snapped the laptop shut and looked up at me, his face instantly defensive. It's not what you think. I was just looking for some guidance. He's successful, and I need to learn from him. I stared at him, anger rising in my chest. Guidance? You're talking to my sister's husband like he's your mentor? This isn't about learning, Daniel. This is about you trying to one-up him, just like you've been trying to one-up everyone else. He stood up abruptly, his face flushing with frustration. That's not fair. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to always feel like you're not enough. I took a step back, the weight of his words hitting me harder than I expected. I've been trying to understand for years, Daniel, but this obsession with proving yourself, it's destroying us. He didn't respond. Instead, he stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there, shaken and confused. I was left wondering if the man I had married would ever be the man I needed him to be. Every time I thought we were making progress, something would happen that would pull us right back into the same cycle of frustration and disappointment. I tried to reach out to him over the next few days, but he was distant, cold. He buried himself in work, in meetings, in anything but us. And I was starting to wonder if I had been holding on to a version of him that didn't exist anymore. The days stretched into weeks, and Daniel and I became little more than two ghosts haunting the same house. We'd speak only when we had to. Short, clipped conversations about groceries, bills, the dog. Every interaction was like walking barefoot over glass, careful not to say the wrong thing or trigger another silent retreat. And yet, through all that, I wasn't ready to give up. I convinced him to go with me to a marriage counselor. He didn't protest. Maybe he thought it would make him look like a better man, someone who was trying. But in those sessions, I felt like I was talking to a polished version of him. Polite, articulate, but not real, not vulnerable. Never once did he say what I needed to hear, that he was scared, that he'd lost his way, that he wanted to find his way back. Then came the moment that finally broke everything. We were at my nephew's birthday party. The whole family was there, my parents, my sister Lily, her husband Richard, and their kids. Daniel came along, dressed well, smiling just the right amount, making small talk with everyone. I could tell he was performing, pretending. But then, during dinner, I overheard something that stopped me cold. Richard was talking to my father, and I caught the words, "Yeah, Daniel's been asking about partnership opportunities in my firm." I told him I'd think about it, but I'm not sure he's ready. There's a lot of pressure, and he still seems all over the place. Daniel. My husband had gone behind my back, again, trying to work with Richard. The same man he couldn't stand, the one he constantly compared himself to. It felt like desperation, like he was trying to become someone he wasn't by attaching himself to someone else's image. I confronted him in the car on the way home. "Why didn't you tell me you were trying to work with Richard?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. He shrugged, "Because I knew you'd judge me." I stared at him. "Daniel, this isn't about judgment. It's about trust. You keep hiding things from me, not because you're protecting me, but because you're ashamed of who you are." That silence again. Then, softly, he said, "Maybe I am ashamed." I didn't say anything else. I just looked out the window, blinking hard to stop the tears. That night, I slept on the couch, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely. I felt free, because I finally saw him for who he was and who he wasn't. A week later, I packed a small suitcase and left. No dramatic fight, no shouting, just a quiet note on the kitchen counter. "I've tried everything, but I won't keep trying alone." I moved in with my sister for a while. It wasn't easy and it wasn't clean, but it was real. Daniel called once, left a message saying he understood. He never called again. And honestly, that silence was the loudest answer I ever needed.